Today is Tuesday, March 5th. This is the Senate Finance Committee, and we are beginning voting list number 10. And the first bill on the list goes to Nathan.
First bill on the list, as amended and reflected in the reprint before you, Senate Bill 18 is an emergency bill that authorizes a licensed pharmacist to administer certain vaccinations to an individual who is at least 7 years old, and that's found at the bottom of page 2 onto page 3. Additionally, a pharmacist may order and administer 3 specific categories: an influenza vaccine, COVID-19 vaccine, or a vaccine used in response to a public health emergency to an individual who is at least 3 years old. And that can be found on pages 1 and 2 of the reprint. A pharmacist must meet certain training, continuing education, record keeping, and notice requirements. And finally, the bill clarifies circumstances under which a pharmacist may administer vaccinations to an adult and repeals language that temporarily authorized a pharmacist to administer certain vaccines to an individual aged 3 to 17. And so the amendments are offered by the bill's sponsor. My understanding is that these are consensus amendments that are also being considered in the House.
You got a motion? Is that your bill? No. I thought that was
Move favorable. Thank you. Do we have a second? Senator Klassmeyer move favorable. Do I have a second? Is
second.
Senator Lamb seconded. Do we have any discussion, any questions on Senate Bill 18? Senator Guile.
I just have one question. So what's the youngest age? 3 years old?
Yes.
That they can administer the vaccine?
Yes. So at the beginning of, beginning on the bottom of page 1. So a pharmacist may order and administer a vaccination to an individual who is at least 3 years old if the vaccine is an influenza vaccine, COVID-19 vaccine, or used in response to a public health emergency. So the provisions that are being repealed would have that had been in current law for some time in relation to the pandemic, authorized pharmacists to administer these vaccines to an individual between the ages of 3 and 13.
Okay. And I mean, I know the pediatricians weren't a huge fan of this. Have we gotten any feedback from them since then?
My understanding is that yes.
Oh, and they're okay with this?
Because all other vaccines are 7 and older.
Okay.
So it's only these few vaccines that they can do from 3. So if we have another COVID emergency, they'll be able to administer that vaccine, for instance, or the influenza.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, we have a motion and a second, Senator Hayes.
I was trying to find out. So but the bill came in at 5 years old for even those things, right? Why
Yeah,
did
so
it
that's
go-
also at the bottom of page 1 where it said to an individual who's at least 5 years old.
What happened to make us lower that age?
Well, I can't speak to what happened, but with respect to the bill as it was introduced where it said 5 years, that was in reference to all vaccines. So now
Got
it's
it.
been bifurcated.
Understood. Makes sense.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Just to clarify, this was agreed upon by the pediatricians, so they supported this. And I think one of the challenges that we've seen, and also as a father of a 2-year-old, it's been hard to get some of the really young kids, if the parents want them to get vaccinated, because a lot of the pediatricians are not carrying some of these vaccines, like the COVID vaccine, because of the handling and all that other stuff. And so it's been really hard to get some of these kids under the age of 3 actually vaccinated. You have to go to local health department clinics, not always available, et cetera, et cetera. So I think part of the intent was to make it a little bit easier for parents who have young kids who want to get them vaccinated to also have access to that, to increase accessibility.
Thank you, Senator Lamb. So,
A question?
sure.
So it says influenza vaccine, COVID-19, or never mind, or used in a public emergency. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
All right, Senator Now.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the pediatricians, did they give us a letter or how did they offer their support? Because I met with pediatricians and they gave me an age of 13. But that was just in a personal side meeting. So I don't know if you negotiated something, they write a letter of support or.
We did negotiate and spoke to Senator Augustine and, I know they agreed to the 7. I don't think we have, do we have anything to write in?
I'm looking now in my email, but
In the meantime, while we're looking, Senator Worthing.
Thank you. What's the penalty if the pharmacist has not taken the course or the training that's necessary to provide it? Is there a penalty for that?
I'm sure it's a licensing issue if he hasn't.
I'm not aware of a specific penalty provision in the bill, but it would be something that would be reportable to the licensing board.
And their license can be revoked if they did provide it without the training?
I can't speak for the level of penalty that the board would assess. I think it would depend on the circumstances. Board of Pharmacy exam.
They can have a license, but under this bill, they have to be trained, right? There's a education component for it. And
So
then,
perhaps I could ask you to narrow the question. So you're saying if a pharmacist did not comply with one of the provisions listed on page 2, one of the training and education provisions, you're asking what would the penalty for administering a vaccine without having complied with one of those conditions?
correct.
I would say that there's nothing in the bill that speaks directly to that, but if a pharmacist had not met those requirements, they would not be authorized under the bill to perform the administration of that vaccine or the ordering of that vaccine. And then to have done so without meeting these requirements would be a violation of statute that the board would consider.
If there's a complaint made, of course.
If it were brought to the attention of the board, I suppose that would have to happen, yes.
All right, thanks.
Do we have all our questions answered? We have a motion and a second. Do we have all our questions answered? Are we ready to vote?
Works for me.
It would be
Clerk,
another-
would you like to call the
would
roll?
Fall
please?
under perhaps another
Okay,
public
we're gonna-
health
We're
emergency.
gonna call the roll.
Senate Bill 18 favorable with amendment. Vice Chair Klausmeier.
Yes.
Yes. Senator Kramer.
Yes.
Yes. Senator Hayes. Pass. Senator Ellis.
Yes.
Yes. Senator Mouts.
No.
No. Senator Washington.
Yes.
Yes. Senator Guile.
Yes.
Yes. Senator Lamb.
Yes.
Yes. Senator Hershey.
No.
No. Senator Hayes.
Yes.
Yes. Madam Chair.
Yes.
Yes. 8 to 2, bill passes.
Vaccinated to die.
Ready to go.
Doctor says
Yeah.
it's a good idea.
So the next bill on the list.
Listen up, Nathan's on the next bill.
So as amended and shown in the reprint before you, Senate Bill 371 requires each residential service agency by September 1, 2025, and annually thereafter to submit a report to the Department of Labor documenting the agency's average wage rate and highest and lowest wage rates for personal care aides. The Department of Health is required within 180 days of the release of the final federal ensuring access to Medicaid services rule to submit a specified report on an overview of the rule, as well as plans and steps the department will take to operationalize the rule. So the amendments strike requirements that the Department of Health conduct a specified reimbursement analysis every 2 years and substitutes the report on the finalized federal rule that I just described.
Senator Hayes is favorable and Senator Lamb seconded. All in favor of Senate Bill 371?
Just a report. I'm sorry. Should we call the roll? We need to call the roll.
Senate Bill 371 favorable with amendment. Vice Chair Klausmeyer.
Yes.
Yes. Senator Kramer.
Yes.
Yes. Senator Hayes.
Yeah.
Yes. Senator Ellis.
Yeah.
Yes. Senator Mouts.
No.
No. Senator Washington. Yes. Senator Guile.
Yes.
Yes. Senator Lamb.
Yeah.
Yes. Senator Hershey. No. Madam Chair.
Yes,
Yes. 8-2, bill passes.
Next bill on the list is Senate Bill 764, which establishes an arts incubator work group to study how arts and cultural institutions can support local artists. The state, there are no amendments, no fiscal impact.
Senate, okay, we have Senator Kramer motion, Senator Hayes seconded, all in favor of Senate Bill 764. Unanimous vote, thank you.
Senate Bill 781 renames the Regional Additive Manufacturing Partnership of Maryland to be the Regional Advanced Manufacturing Partnership of Maryland and makes similar changes to the purposes, membership, and duties of the program to incorporate advanced manufacturing instead of additive manufacturing. There are no amendments. There is no fiscal impact.
Do I have a motion? Senator Klausmeyer, do I have a second?
Thank you, Senator Washington. We have a motion and a second, all in favor of Senate Bill 781. Raise your hands. It's a unanimous vote, thank you.
Senate Bill 799 authorizes the State Board of Dental Examiners to waive specified education requirements for an applicant for a limited license to practice adult in addition to pediatric dentistry. The board may grant a waiver if, in addition to other requirements under current law, the dental director of the federally qualified health center or Maryland qualified health center for which the applicant has contractually agreed to provide at least 2 years of dental services requests the waiver from the board. The bill also establishes a pathway for practitioners of adult dentistry who receive a waiver under the bill to receive a general dentistry license in the state. There are some amendments that are reflected in the reprint and offered by the bill's sponsor. The amendment authorizes an applicant to complete a dental fellowship at the University of Maryland School of Dentistry or another dental school recognized by the board. And it further repeals a requirement that the dean of the University of Maryland School of Dentistry request the waiver described and makes conforming changes. There's no fiscal impact and no opposition at the committee hearing.
Favorable.
Senator Klausmeyer moved favorable. Can I have a second? Senator Washington second. All in favor of Senate Bill 799? It's a unanimous vote. Thank you. Then David,
Okay, you've got a lot of bills on the list with my initial or name attached to. Hopefully there's a lot of softballs. The first one is Senate Bill 244. This is the third time this has been forwarded to the committee. You have a reprint in front of you. And we'll go straight. I think you know what the bill does. It puts vaping in the same category as smoking regarding banning the use of this product indoors in an indoor area open to the public or in a workplace. Let's go straight to page 3 of the reprint. This is an amendment that's from the chair that deals with the carve out or the exception for retail tobacco businesses that are, so they can have indoor smoking, but they have to have the primary activity as the retail sale of tobacco products, and the sale of other products is incidental. And the amendment is the business does not possess a license for the sale of alcoholic beverages for on-site consumption. That's the first change in the bill and then there was another change. If you go to the last page, and I have a number 2 there.
David, if I can stop you, let's take a vote on amendment number 1.
Okay.
So do I have a motion or a second?
Move favorable.
Okay, and we have a motion and a second on amendment number 1. We have a question from Senator Hershey.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I do recognize it's your amendment, but just this would affect businesses that are already operating as well too? Or just doesn't go forward? It doesn't allow it to go forward?
It doesn't address either
It doesn't.
but it will be up to the health department who's creating regulations, how they want to handle the ones that are already licensed by the various counties.
Okay, and
We're not taking away anybody's license, but we're stating that it does not include a license for alcoholic beverages.
okay, and did last hearing, last voting session, you mentioned that you thought there was only 7 of these? Did I hear that?
That's all we know about.
That's all we know
Yeah,
about.
we have a list of 7.
Okay,
None are in your county, Senator Hershey.
thank you. That you know about.
Senator Ellis,
This is, this amendment end of my weekend, because because I just found out there are 5 of these, and thank you, Madam Chair, 5 of these in my county, and I thought it was only 1. And so they're very much concerned about hurting their business and so could this be like a separate bill next year?
we're going to take a vote on the amendment and we can decide. Senator Hayes.
Could we add something to clarify that this is going forward and not retrospective, so we could give greater clarity to the health departments that will be making that decision?
Actually, that's been discussed at length in some meetings. And the issue is that we are then protecting licenses of the people who
We're smart
Receipt-
enough to get ahead of the
no,
game.
who received a license that they really shouldn't have received because the Indoor Clean Air Act said there's no smoking and alcohol together indoors. And so, you know, cigar lounges got an exception when we passed the bill in 2007, and that was one of the first votes I ever took. So we made an exception for cigar lounges. They weren't supposed to have alcohol. They were cigar lounges.
Yeah.
And then over time, they've kind of morphed into these, you know, some have full bars.
Mm.
They should be, you know, in my county, they finally limited it to 30%, but it's still not what the Clean Indoor Act was meant to be. So we know the health department is creating regulation. They're concerned about it, particularly as these proliferate. We're concerned about counties going forward, continuing to issue licenses. And in fact, Annapolis City just issued an ordinance permitting it, which hopefully this will get in before they actually license anyone. So, you know, do we want to follow the law or not?
Yeah.
That's really what this amendment's about. Do we want to follow the law that was passed, that we don't smoke and have alcohol indoors?
Yeah, I think it's a great bill. It's just, I think it's hard for small businesses that have been practicing this way to have to go back. I get it. Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate it. Is there a motion?
So Senator Lamb.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to back up the chair's point on this, that, you know, it's the current, because of interpretation of the current law, it's been applied unevenly across different jurisdictions. And I think it's not really fair when we've had other entities from, say, Prince George's have come in to ask for this, and we have not granted them that exception, but other local health departments, or based on their interpretation, have granted the liberty to certain jurisdictions to have these. And so it's just, there's lack of uniformity here, and I don't think it's fair for other facilities that want to have this, that can't have this, simply because other folks were able to score it in, and based on, you know, kind of probably from my perspective, improper interpretation of the law, been able to have these facilities set up. So this is just to really level set and say that, you know, this is the intention of the Clean Air Act, to not allow these to coexist at the same time.
Just need to correct one thing. The health department hasn't been paying attention. It's been the local liquor boards that have been issuing the licenses. Now the health department is paying attention. They
That
realize.
you're correct. That's
this-
right.
this is
I
an
wish
issue.
the health department would pay a little bit more attention. But they're
Senator
not here.
Hayes?
This, because I know of a situation whereas the cigar lounge is on one floor, but the bar is on a whole different floor, but they're in the same building, right? And
Are
so
they
they're
different
completely separate.
licenses? Are they different licenses?
What do you mean different
Is-
liquor licenses or different?
Well, I would think they have a retail smoking license for the cigar bar.
Right.
And then they would have another license for the alcohol. Is in the
Which are in
same-
two different locations.
But are they in the same name?
That's a
know.
good question. I don't know. But if it's the case that they're both in the same name, this would have an effect on, although they're completely separated by two different floors.
Yes, I think so. They're same business. Senator Mounts, I'd love to hear your comments on this.
Lincoln. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm torn over the process. I'm torn over the process because the argument is there, it's clear. However, if you step away from this hearing room and you go out into these different businesses, they followed all the rules. They've cleared all the hoops and all the hurdles. And so they haven't had the opportunity, to present the issue. So I don't know if I'm I'm not going to be supporting the amendment. However, I understand where the amendment is true, but the process, I think for those individuals, and they, in their mind, they would say to us that, look, we've done this and we've done that and we've been inspected and they've gone through all these other regulatory requirements. So I just wanted to share that and, hopefully that's helpful.
So Senator, I think you have some experience with a business that has alcohol and food, but no smoking.
Yeah, I'm living proof of the impact of the Clean Indoor Act on a small business, without a doubt. And so that's why I understand the validity of the amendment. And as far as all the small businesses go, however, at this point in time where we are, those businesses where they're situated, I know how this will be received and how it'll be perceived. And maybe the process would take a little bit longer than just an amendment on a different bill. And that would be the right time to move forward with something like that. But yeah, it's there are businesses out there that are competing that don't have the ability to offer that type of environment, and it can be a much more profitable business model than other models that have had to adapt to the requirements of the Clean Indoor Act.
I will tell you, if we don't do something this year, by next year, when we try to do something, there'll probably be another 50 of these in the state. Because we're not doing anything, and now the warning shot has been sent out. And I think we're asking for trouble by not doing something now while we're discussing it. But, the intention of the legislature was that there would not be smoking and alcohol indoors together. Senator Reedy.
Can I ask a question? I know I came in from another bill hearing and I apologize, just the way it's been today, but so what you just said, Madam Chair, and not to be argumentative, but there was somebody came in last year trying to get one of these licenses and we said no. There haven't been 50 more since then. So
No, because we didn't give that license, but the license that have been issued inappropriately. They should not have been issued, but the liquor boards were interpreting incidental as including alcohol. So there's been a lot of talk. We could make it 80-20, we could make it 70-30. We could say incidental included everything incidental, including alcohol. There have been a lot of discussion, but when we come down to it, it's not true to what the law was meant. And so I just think, this is our vote, but I think if we don't do something, we're going to have a lot more of these in the next year before we come back and do something about it.
And I appreciate that. I guess in response, my thought is, why are we so, and this is obviously a policy opinion call, but I don't see why this is a bad thing. This is different than when I wasn't here when this happened, but when the legislature banned smoking, it was like anywhere could have smoking in their restaurant, and a lot of people didn't want smoking in their restaurant, and employees didn't want to have to work in an environment. This is a narrow tailored section of the economy that's like either what you would call, I guess, a luxury item or it's exclusive. It's not necessarily exclusive from a money standpoint, although it is, but it's a kind of thing that nobody's just accidentally stumbling into that. I just feel like it's closing off, and I don't do either one of the things that we're talking about, but I feel like it's closing off a job creator and an economic engine that I think in Virginia and DC, they're going to, maybe not, but I don't understand. I feel like we're straining at a gnat here and like trying to take a bazooka to a little gnat. That's what I feel like, but that's, that's, everybody has their own vote, but I don't understand what the problem is.
Back when we passed the bill, I went kicking and screaming about smoking in the bars because I knew what the outcome was going to be. Well, as I go to a bar now, I'm very happy that I come out smelling better. But my point is, and I just really get, when I asked if you could smoke a cigarette in a smoking bar and they said no, it's still smoke. And I bet if I went in there, I'd come out stinking like a cigar. So it's the same thing as the clean air. And I never thought I'd have to say that, but I just think it's the camel's nose under the tent and it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So.
All right, I'm gonna ask that we vote on the amendment. You're not gonna upset the chair if you don't agree with me, but
Thank you.
I think we need to send a message and I'm not sure that maybe this wasn't the right amendment. Maybe we should have said incidental does not include smoking, but I'm gonna ask that we take the vote and we send a message one way or the other. So I think you need to call the roll.
So we're Senate Bill 244, amendment number 1. Vice Chair Klaus Meyer.
Yes.
Yes. Senator Kramer.
Yes.
Yes. Senator Hayes. No. Senator Reedy.
No.
No. Senator Ellis. Pass. Senator Mount. No. Senator Washington.
Yes.
Yes. Senator Guile.
Yes.
Yes. Senator Lamb.
Yes.
Yes. Senator Hershey.
No.
No. Senator Ellis.
Yes.
Yes. Madam Chair.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
7-4.
7-4. Okay, there's one more amendment to the bill. If you go to the last page of the reprint, this was at the suggestion of the department, and Maryland, the Department of Labor also regulates implements this ban for workplaces and updates their section of the law and strikes tobacco and just goes with smoke. So that would be the second amendment to the bill.
Thank you, Senator Hayes. Is there a second? Thank you, Senator Lamb. Let's take a vote on amendment number 2. All
Senate
in
Bill,
favor? Okay, I think we better call the roll again.
That's all right.
You like this one, right?
Pardon me? It's fine? The amendment's fine?
Yeah.
Okay. Everyone in favor of amendment number 2, raise your hand, please. It's a unanimous vote. Thank you. No. I don't know who moved. Senator Hayes moved and Senator Washington second. Vote on the bill as amended. Call the roll, please.
Senate Bill 244 as amended. Vice Chair Klaus Meyer.
Yes.
Yes. Senator Kramer.
Yes.
Yes. Senator Hayes.
Yes.
Yes. Senator Reedy.
No.
No. Senator Ellis.
Yes.
Yes. Senator Mounts.
No.
No. Senator Washington.
Yes.
Yes. Senator Guile.
Yes.
Yes. Senator Lamb.
Yes.
Yes. Senator Hershey.
No.
No. Madam Chair.
Yes.
Yes. 8-3, the bill passes.
Okay. The next bill on your list is Senate Bill 436. This was held from last week. This concerns workplace fraud and prevailing wage violations. As you have a reprint in front of you, the bill came in establishing criminal penalties for violations of the workplace fraud law and prevailing wage law. The amendments offered by the sponsor of the bill strike the criminal penalties in both places and increase for knowing violations of the workplace fraud law to $10,000, and then if for multiple violations to $30,000. And there was some referrals in here that if the department finds a violation, they would have to refer to various entities. That is simplified to the comptroller for an investigation by the Field Enforcement Bureau or the U.S. and to the U.S. Department of Labor, and this would apply in both places to possible violations of workplace fraud and prevailing wage.
Move favorable?
Thank you.
Second.
Senator Guile moved favorable, Senator Kramer moved second. Do we need to call the roll? Senate Bill 436, please call the roll. As amended, yes.
Senate Bill 436 as amended. Vice Chair Klausmeier.
Yes.
Yes. Senator Kramer.
Yes.
Yes. Senator Hayes.
Yes.
Yes. Senator Reedy. Pass. Senator Ellis.
Yes.
Yes. Senator Mounts.
No.
No. Senator Washington.
Yes.
Yes. Senator Guile.
Yes.
Yes. Senator Lamb.
Yes.
Yes. Senator Hershey.
No.
No. Madam Chair.
Yes.
Yes. 8-2, the bill passes.
Senate Bill 436 favorable 8-2.
Okay, the next bill on your list was not held. This is a bill that was heard last week. It's from the administration. It's a Senate Bill 475. It establishes the Center for Firearm Violence Prevention in the Maryland Health Department. The purpose of this center is to reduce firearm violence, harm from firearm violence, and misuse of firearms in the state by partnering with making various partnerships to implement a health approach to firearm violence reduction. The center has various duties. They must work in consultation with state agencies and stakeholders, solicit and consider recommendations from specified communities and experts, and submit a plan to the governor and the General Assembly. And also every 4 years, they would have to develop a plan and submit that for firearm violence prevention reduction. The bill is a public health bill, and there are no amendments offered. And if you go through the bill, you'll see that it establishes the center, it provides for an executive director, provides for the duties on page 2. And then there's some additional optional duties for the center on page 3. And the reporting requirements are all on the top of page 3.
Senator Hayes moved favorable. To have a second?
No second.
No. Somebody, this is an administration bill. Somebody needs a second. Thank you, Senator Washington. All right. Now we can have questions on Senate Bill 475, the administration bill. Questions? Senator Washington, you have a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mhm.
On page 3 of the bill, section B, number 2, it says issue best practice guidance and model process in consultation with affected communities regarding implementation of evidence-based firearm violence prevention strategies. How would they? I wasn't here for the public hearing. Unfortunately, I had multiple bill hearings, so I missed this bill hearing. I just wondered, like, what does that look like in theory, or what would that look like for those communities? And when you say affected communities, do you mean the police departments? Do you mean the who are we talking about here in affected communities? Because
this is very broad brush language for this public health approach to firearm violence prevention. I would imagine, if I recall from the testimony, affected communities are those communities around the state that have a high incidence of firearm violence. And so that would be the target here. Best practices and guidance. These are standard this is standard kind of high profile language that the department will certainly get into the weeds more as they proceed with implementing these strategies. But I would imagine affected communities would be those communities affected most by firearm violence.
We at Hopkins here and other academic institutions that are already looking at best practices that's available. And so part of the testimony during the public hearing was that this center would be collaborating with those institutions that are already investigating and providing the research in this area.
yeah, I understand that. It looks like something like that could be happening already or is happening already.
Correct.
And I wonder if the $10 million that's under this bill, is it for grants to those affected communities, or is it just personnel for those affected community? Like, or is it just the center itself gets this $10 million and they
And it's
determine
been
what they do?
reduced to 6 million, by the way, but
Okay,
in the
I just saw the
supplemental.
10 million. I
But it
didn't-
is for the center. It is to fund the center and the work that they need to do. Questions? Senator Hershey, I'm sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I just think that this center is is redundant to what we already have. We've already got the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention, Youth and Victim Services. We've already got the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention and Policy, I guess the same thing, but I'm just not sure why, and to say that it was reduced to 6 million, did that mean that changes were made, or they just decided that they didn't really need the 10 million, they only need 6 million? So nothing's changed within the bill. Again, I just don't think it's our best use of $6 million, so I'm not gonna vote for it.
No. Okay.
If there's no other discussion, let's call the roll.
Senate Bill 475 favorable, Vice Chair Klausmeyer.
Yeah.
Yes, Senator Kramer.
Yes.
Yes, Senator Hayes.
Yes.
Yes, Senator Ellis.
Yeah.
Yes, Senator Mouts.
No.
No, Senator Washington.
Explaining my vote, Madam Chair.
Yes.
I'm voting, do I vote first or do I just say?
Doesn't matter.
I'm voting yes on the bill, but I would hope that this 6 mil, well, it says 10 million in the fiscal note, but I guess it went down to 6 million, is used to reduce gun violence in a meaningful way to help those communities and provide them with services and technical assistance within those communities, and not just building another apparatus or a government entity, because our communities need this. But we need that money in our communities, not necessarily with the governmental entity that we're just expanding. So I didn't see that necessarily in this bill, but I'm voting for it in hopes that we can see some change.
And I think those are excellent comments, and I invite you to have a conversation with the administration.
Nothing I just did.
Thank you. Thank you. Senator, go ahead.
Senator Guile.
Yes.
Yes, Senator Lamb.
Yes.
Yes, Senator Hershey.
No.
No, Madam Chair.
Yes,
Yes.
bill passes 8-2.
Okay. Okay, the next bill on your list is another administration bill. This is Senate Bill 477, the Time to Serve Act. This does two things. Last year, there was legislation and it greatly expanded the use of disaster service leave for state employees. This would expand that for only employees in the executive branch, because last year's bill would apply to all three branches. This would expand that for only employees in the executive service up to 30 days of disaster service leave for certain disasters. And there was also a part of the law that requires that allows leave for the uniformed services for training and things of that nature, and it will expand that up, this state leave for state employees up to 30 days also. And I believe that actually the House bill is already over here in committee.
Move favorable, Senator Washington. Do I have a second? Senator Ellis. All in favor of the Time to Serve Senate Bill 477?
Everybody, the executive branch will not us. Yeah, the executive branch, there's
Just
a
exclude
legislative,
legislative,
judicial and
judicial.
executive branch.
Okay.
Okay, the next bill on your list is Senate Bill 478. This is also an administration bill that does, again, two things. Some of you may remember that several years ago, you passed legislation not mandating a preference for hiring veterans for private sector employees, because you can't do that, but it's all may. So it expand that hiring preference to the spouses of eligible service members, and regarding a state preference for hiring veterans. Under current law, veterans and spouses of disabled veterans or surviving spouses get a 10-point credit on their selection test. This would add military spouses to that ability to get that 10-point credit on selection tests.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion from Senator Hayes and a second from Senator Klausmeyer. All in favor of oh, I'm sorry.
So this bill, during the hearing, some individuals came and talked about adding the uniform services instead of just the armed services, and reached out to the administration. They're in favor of that. The bill passed in that posture in the House. So we just need to get the amendments. So ask for hold on this bill until the next voting session to add those amendments.
We'll hold the bill for the amendment from the House. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. the next bill on your list was held from last week. And this is the it's really hard to say that. The range, I'll just say range transparency bill. You have a reprint in front of you. In fact, you have two reprints in front of you because there's going to be Senator Lamb is also going to offer an amendment. The reprint in front of you is similar to the reprint from last week, but there was some change. There's some additions here. After further going through there, when the committee agreed to strike all the specific private right of action regarding wage ranges and their publishing when you try to hire somebody, there was a lot of language in there regarding applicants, and that probably was related to the ability for a private right of action specifically related to wage ranges. So if you go to page 5 of the reprint, you'll see that whole section regarding private right of action is not struck from the law, but just struck from the bill, because there's no reason to leave all that in there if you're taking out the private right of action for wage ranges. So that's a revised amendment from last week, which the committee had approved. And Senator Lamb has an amendment, but I believe I don't know how you want to deal with this, if you want to take this up first or then go, because Senator Lamb's amendment relates somewhat to only a portion of the private right of action, but it does a lot more. And I believe he can explain his amendment.
So let's call this amendment number 1. And amendment number 1 takes out the private right of action. Can I have a motion for amendment number 1?
Madam Chair.
Yes.
So it was brought to my attention, David, maybe you could respond to this, that it doesn't entirely take out the private right of action, and there were some concerns.
That was,
I think specifically regarding the applicant or.
that's all gone now.
That's all gone
That's all
now? Okay,
gone now,
good.
yes.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, and Senator Mounts? Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Senator Mounts moved, and can I have a second on amendment number 1?
Okay.
Okay, Senator Hayes. So all in favor of amendment number 1, taking out the private right of action? Do we need to call a roll call? Okay. Is it unanimous? Okay.
Okay, so, and just to be clear, last week you also approved of some amendments offered by the department to simplify some of the language and to establish a form that employers could use to, that's all, you've already adopted that. And one other thing, Senator Mounts had a question about those who hire visas, and that question's been addressed. They're okay with this, with the bill as is.
We have amendment number 2, which is Senator Lamb's amendment.
Oh, Senator Lamb's amendment is also in front of you, and what that does is it brings in the part of the law, it brings in most of the law that concerns actually the equal pay for equal work, which is not part of this bill. And it's different, additional categories of folks who would this equal pay for equal work would apply to. If you go to his amendment, which is it would be the other amendment. I guess I should have marked it better. But you'll see there's new language added, and you'll see that in addition to an employer may not discriminate between employees of any occupation by having a wage of one sex or gender identity, it adds the pay difference based on race, religious belief, sex, gender identity, or sexual orientation of the employees. And then goes forward with that, a similar thought throughout. And then if you go back to other parts of the bill, it also adds these same criteria. So basically, employers cannot pay individuals differently based on all those categories, and there are resultant changes throughout the rest of the equal pay for equal work law that related to that prohibition.
Senator Lamb?
Yeah, so I've spoken with the sponsor and she would prefer not to have these amendments put forward. This amendment would otherwise have protected folks from wage discrimination based on race or religious beliefs or sex or gender. So we'll leave those exempted from the bill.
It was a noble idea, but I think we're gonna have enough trouble with the bill just with wage range. Senator Guile?
I'm sorry, maybe it's a question for Senator Lamb. So are you withdrawing the amendment? Because I spoke with the bill sponsor, and I think she had some concerns given that, I think the substance of this bill, maybe Senator Lamb could speak to it, is that it's an entirely separate bill that he currently has pending in JPR. And it's also my understanding that the bill that's the substance of which Senator Lamb's amendment is a separate bill that already has just passed out of ECM in the House and will be headed to finance after crossover, and that it's not needed. And then there's also concerns that adding on this amendment could, get this bill caught in a crossfire between the chambers for no reason and could risk passage ultimately in the House. So, I would just resist the amendment, I guess, but go ahead.
But you're withdrawing the amendment, Senator Lamb?
Yeah, so number one, I was withdrawing the amendment.
All right.
Number two, just to be clear about that explanation, it's not entirely aligned with what's taking place. I do have a bill in JPR that adds protected classes in other parts of the statute where it's already missing. Because as protected classes were added to parts of the statute, there were pieces that weren't entirely included in already existing parts of the statute. This bill, if it were to pass, basically is not incorporated into that bill. So if that bill were to pass, it would add protected classes into other parts of the statute where it's missing. This piece on equal pay for equal work would have it misaligned with that if both bills were to pass. So I'm withdrawing this amendment, but it will allow people to continue to discriminate based on race and religion and other classes when it comes to equal pay to equal work.
So it's possibly a bill for another time. Okay. So we have the First Amendment. We voted for the First Amendment. We now have an amended bill in front of us. Yes. Senator Hershey.
Based on when we discussed this last week, I asked a very specific question on, does this affect employees out of the state? And I thought the answer was no. And so as I'm continuing to look at this, it seems like on the top of page 3, lines 1 through 5, it still would affect an employee that is out of the state of Maryland if that business is physically located in Maryland. And I would like to offer a conceptual amendment to just remove that from the bill. I think it's, again, if we want to do this in the state of Maryland, that's fine. But I don't think that we should put this requirement on businesses that are in Maryland and employees are outside of the state of Maryland. If that's not a policy that is in those states as well too. So I think that, I don't want to say it was the intent, but it certainly was, like I said, when I asked it last week, it sounded like it was not supposed to affect employees out of the state.
So Senator, if I can comment, this is on the employer. So the employer is advertising in Maryland. It's not about where the employee works because he hasn't hired an employee yet. The employer is in the state of Maryland. When he advertises, he or she needs to advertise the wage range. Doesn't matter where he's hiring them from. It's at the time of advertisement.
Well, the way I'm reading it is it talks about where the position will be. So at the bottom of page 2, it says, with respect to a position for work that will be physically performed somewhere. So line 29 says it's being performed in the state. So you're advertising wherever you want to do, but if the work is being done in the state, then they would have to comply with this. But if the work is not being performed in the state, but just happens that the business is in the state of Maryland, then this is responding to that. So it almost makes businesses that are located here that have decided to possibly headquarter here, put them at a position where they now have to engage in this for people that are working in Arizona or Colorado or places like that. That's what I get, because
You're saying for businesses that have multiple locations in other states
that happen to be located where let's say the corporate office is in Maryland And they
Okay.
have businesses
They have
outside the
businesses
state.
outside the state,
Right.
not just by chance that they're hiring an employee from out of state, but they.
No,
actually
if
have-
they're hiring an employee from out of state that's gonna work in Maryland, then this would apply to them.
Okay,
Because the position is in Maryland. But if the position is outside the state of Maryland,
okay.
I don't think that this should have to apply to them.
I'm gonna ask our analyst to comment on that.
Well, again, that's what my understanding of this part of this exemption here was designed to, not exemption, but designed to get it, generally labor laws apply to employers and employees in the state of Maryland. But there's remote work out there. So an employee could be working for a Maryland employee. This was as it was explained, but they could be located anywhere in the country. So if you're advertising for that position, you should put the wage range out there for wherever that, even if that position is located outside the state. That was the explanation given to me, but it does apply to work that is being performed outside the state. For a position that could be working outside the state.
It's very, very specifically that this part of the bill says that the work is gonna be done out, the position will be outside the state. So it's not could be, it's the position is outside the state, but it just so happens that the employer is located in the state.
I agree. I mean, it says, if the position is physically performed at least in part in the state, that's one.
That's
and
fine.
That's fine. But then outside the state, if the employee reports to physically located in the state, do you want to offer an amendment? Do you want to hold it for an amendment?
I'd be fine. I mean, I think it's pretty clear. I think if we just remove lines 1 through 5 on page 3, it takes that out of the play, out of play, and then it just clearly affects an employee with a position in the state of, at least in part or in the state of Maryland.
Thank you, Senator. Any other discussion on an amendment that takes out lines 1 through 5 on page 3?
Oh, yeah.
Does anybody have any comment? Should we take a vote? Okay, you make the motion. Do I have a second? Who seconded? Senator Hayes, thank you. So let's vote on the conceptual amendment. Actually, it's really pretty clear. Lines 1 through 5 on page 3. Can we take a vote? Can we raise our hands? Is it unanimous? Senator Washington, are you with us? Senator Guile, what do you think? Should we take a roll call?
Yeah.
Okay, we should do a roll call.
Senate Bill 525 on the Hershey Amendment. Vice Chair Klaus Meyer.
Yeah.
Yes. Senator Kramer.
Yes.
Yes. Senator Hayes.
Yeah.
Yes. Senator Ellis.
No.
No. Senator Mouts.
Yes.
Yes. Senator Washington.
Yes.
Yes. Senator Guile.
No.
No. Senator Lamb.
No.
No. Senator Hershey.
Yes.
Yeah. Madam Chair.
Yes.
Yes.
I think that's 73. 73.
Okay, so that'll be part of the bill that goes to the floor if you vote disfavorable with amendments.
Well, now we need to vote the bill favorable with amendments. Senator Hayes motion, Senator Klausmeyer seconded. Are we all in favor of Bill 525 as amended? Okay. Senator Lamb, you're not. You are. Okay, unanimous. You're down? Okay, Senator Mouts is not voting. Good work. You're voting no. So I said you're not. Anybody else voting no? Okay, thank you. So we have a 9-1.
Okay, moving right along. So the next bill on your list is Senate Bill 613. This bill makes modifications to a law that was passed several years ago in 2022 from Senator Kelly that would regulate assisted living program managers. It would add them to the current to the board. It also regulates nursing home administrators. It alters the training requirements to manage an assisted living program, moves back the actual licensing of these program administrators to 2026, and establishes new appointment dates for the relevant board members who would be added to this expanded licensing board. There are some amendments offered in the reprint you have in front of you, and they go way to the back. And this is from the sponsor, but I believe this is through the actual board, so they're having a little delay in getting these folks regulated. So there's additional reporting requirements related to the licensing added to the uncodified language in the back of the bill. So those are the amendments offered by the sponsor.
Apparently it's taking them some time because they didn't have enough board members to. work
And the
on this
House
issue.
bill is moving or will be over here very shortly as amended, similarly amended.
Same amendments.
Move favorable.
Thank you, Senator Classmeyer, second. And Senator Washington, all in favor of the amended bill? Okay, so Senate Bill 613 was unanimous.
Okay, the next bill, this is Senate Bill 623. It establishes the Prison Education Delivery Reform Commission. There are no amendments. Oh, no, there are some amendments. You have a reprint in front of you. Like with any of these commissions that are established for a short period of time, folks want to add in or get on it or add some duties. You'll see as you go through the reprint, it's a 2-year commission. It'll include 3 members of the Senate and 3 members of the House and various state agencies. There's an amendment on page 2 that would add a representative from the Goucher College Prison Education Partnership. And then if you go to page 3 of the bill, there's another organization that this commission would add another organization for this commission to consult with experience in peer recovery and support services. And again, the commission would terminate in 2026.
Motion
Move favorable.
and a second. Senator Classmeyer. Oh, wait a minute. Do I have a second?
Second.
Senator Gao. Senator Hayes, you have a question?
Not necessarily a question, Madam Chair, but during the hearing, I had expressed the interest in making sure that they examine MCE. The sponsor sounded like she was open to it. I guess between now and then, I'd like to circulate something to the sponsor and the committee to see if we would be open to add. I don't want to slow the bill down now by holding the bill, but because I think it's a great bill, but I'd like to.
So are you thinking you would work on a floor amendment?
Yes, ma'am. As
Okay.
long as the chair, of course, and the committee was okay with it as well as the sponsor.
Would it be easier just to hold it till Wednesday or Thursday and do an amendment here in the
Okay,
committee?
we
All
could
right,
do
let's hold the bill. Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question on the bill.
Okay,
I'm a member of MCE of the board. And so I wondered why they weren't considered to be on this bill versus being a subject of the bill. Was there any thought to that, or do we know at all?
You'd have to talk to this. MC is Maryland Correctional Enterprises.
Correct.
I would imagine since this is about education rather than actual this is workforce. There's another one about education. She has another committee. That's right. You'd have to talk to the sponsor why she didn't include MCE. I'm as with any commission, it's certainly, you can-
okay. So we're holding the bill. It gives you a day or two, if you don't mind, and then you can, the two of you can work on an amendment. How's that? Thank you.
Okay. Okay, the next bill on your list is Senate Bill 651. This various versions of this bill have been in committee for at least 5 or 6 years, maybe more. It's the business sell motor fuel price signage, and as amended, the Gas Price Clarity Act. The bill requires each service station, regardless of the type of fuel sold, to prominently display the credit price if higher than the cash price or all prices charged for fuel. It also removes an obsolete provision regarding the number of pumps at a service station. The sponsor has offered amendments, which you have in a reprint in front of you, and one of the amendments changes it from gas price gouging to gas price clarity. It also preempts any local laws regarding this type of requirement. And if you go to page 2, you'll see the actual language regarding what kind of signage has to be posted regarding gas fuel prices at a service station. There's also an amendment on page 3 of the reprint that specifies that all the lettering should be the same size. I believe a lot of this is designed to allow for easier enforcement by the group that Weights and Measures that enforces this requirement. And there's language struck at the bottom, which would duplicate some language up top. That's the bill. Many years.
Senator Ellis.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So during the bill hearing, I was even more confused about the price and choices that I will face out there trying to get gas, especially when I'm traveling and I'm not familiar with those folks who are always clear with their price. And it seems like we are, if with this pass, we will be creating more confusion. From my humble opinion, maybe I wasn't the sharpest guy in the room when the bill hearing happened, and it just kind of went over my head. Plus, the local laws we will be preempting, are they really better than this bill, which seems confusing? And so I would hate to preempt something that's really good in a county. I'm sorry? No. So I have just a lot of questions with this bill. I'm not sure. Huh? I don't know. I'm not really wedded to this bill, but I just want to air my concerns.
I would love to see us pass this bill so we can stop hearing this bill.
We can do something else with it.
Yeah, so
Find out, I think in the comments, we know which counties have already passed a local bill.
I believe Montgomery, according to sponsor Montgomery, Prince George's, and I believe Howard, and the concern was that, you know, by preempting and you have one set of, you know, like with everything else you've done with smoking and minimum wage and paid sick leave, by preempting locals, you give one set of requirements that all the service station dealers would have to comply with.
Senator Hershey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, for 4 counties to have moved forward with this, I don't know that necessitates us having to do preemptive language for each of those counties. And, you know, my colleague might be correct here. We don't know if their language is any less stringent or more stringent than what this bill is. So, and it also doesn't mean that the other 20 jurisdictions are going to move forward with legislation to require this. So this then becomes, you know, again, a statewide bill based on the fact that 4 counties have done this. You know, we start talking about preemption, we start possibly making, you know, it be more restrictive than what's out there. That, you know, this isn't for the Wawas and the rural farms. They're in compliance. They know what they're doing. This is going to affect all the smaller mom and pops that maybe, you know, the law that's in Howard County is fine, that they can do something with that already. So I just think this is a step too far. And it's once again, we've had this for 5 years. I don't think because 4 counties have adopted it, that there's need.
I'm going to ask to hold the bill, and I'm going to talk to the sponsor about what the other counties have done.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, next on your list is this one, softball. Senate Bill 712. If you recall, last year, there was an emergency legislation that required a contractor operating the Charlotte Hall Veterans Home to provide any deficiency information to an enforcement agency. This bill comes in and makes additional changes to last year's law. It adds additional groups to the monitoring agencies, and it adds a 15-day correction period and various other reporting requirements. You should have an amendment in front of you, which adds St. Mary's County as a governing body, which should get this information also. This bill has already moved or is moving out of the House in the same form.
Smiler moved favorable, Senator Hayes second. All in favor of this good bill, Senate Bill 712.
It's favorable with amendments.
Favorable with amendments. Okay, unanimous, I think. Senator Hershey, are you okay with it? Thank you.
Okay, the next bill on your list is Senate Bill 809. Under current law, most governments and businesses are prohibited from administering polygraph examinations. However, there's There are exceptions to this law in the labor and employment article. This bill would add in Dorchester County only, an EMT or a 911 dispatcher from exempting them from the prohibition on lie detector tests. And if there's a reprint in front of you, it strikes language in there adding correctional officer at the Dorchester County Detention Center because those folks are already exempted under existing law.
Senator Klausmeyer is favorable. Do I have a second? Senator Mount second. All in favor of Senate Bill 809? Any opposed? Senator Hayes, are you okay? Senate Bill 809 is unanimous. Okay,
Okay, and before you get to the main event, the last bill is Senate Bill 875. This is the Miriam Kelty Aging and Senior Social Connection Hub and Spoke Program. It establishes this hub and spoke program in Montgomery County and requires the Maryland Department of Aging to grant them. It's a pilot program and it requires aging to grant a 3-year pilot program that requires aging to grant them $80,000 for this hub and spoke program. These programs are designed to allow people to age in their communities. You have a reprint in front of you with an amendment which specifies how the money is to be transferred from the state down to this consortium in Montgomery County. And this same bill is moving through the House or is already here in the Finance Committee as amended.
okay, Senator Klausmeyer moved favorable, Senator Kramer seconded. All in favor of? Not really.
It's a pilot program for one jurisdiction, but it doesn't have anything to do with the government there.
But it has statewide.
The entity, yeah, the entity happens to be located in Montgomery County.
Got it, thanks.
All in favor of Senate Bill 875? Unanimous vote. Thank you. All right. Or to Patrick.
Next bill on the voting list is Senate Bill 541. This is a bill that was held from the last voting session. We walked through a reprint of amendments that the sponsor has agreed to accept based on some folks who've approached her about amendments. So I've got a stack in front of you, and the first thing that I'll do is that Senator Guile has made I think 4 changes to the amendment set that we walked through at the last voting session. So I want to just highlight those for you. If you go to page 13, so I've handwritten page numbers on the reprint set. Page 13 of the reprint set here, there is a clarification of the exemption for medical record information that is treated like HIPAA protected health information. And so that language is here so that data, certain information is exempt from the bill would include information that's a medical record under the Health General article if the information is held by an entity that is a covered entity or business associate under HIPAA because it collects, uses, or discloses protected health information, and the entity applies the same standards for the collection, use, and disclosure of the information as required for the protected health information under HIPAA and medical records under state statute, including specific standards regarding legally protected health care. So the second amendment, so in the previous reprint, there's this section that establishes a number of prohibited acts that are applicable to a controller, and the sponsor had amended this to also apply to processors. But Senator Guile has elected to strike adding processors to this prohibition. So all these prohibited acts would apply only to controllers. I'm on page 19. handwritten. So the third one is on handwritten 21. And this is similar to the other amendment, and this likewise only applies certain requirements to controllers instead of having these requirements apply to processors also. So that's one change to the reprint. And then I think the last change to Senator Giles' amendments is on page 32. It's the handwritten 32. And what this language does is it establishes liability protections to controllers or processors from independent misconduct of processors or third-party controllers. So that's what that amendment would do. And so those are the four changes to Senator Giles' set of amendments. So I can continue to walk through the other amendments that are offered, or would you like to?
What would the sponsor like to do?
You know, I don't know procedurally. Do we move to adopt the amendments that I've offered? Okay.
We can. Senator Washington has his light. Senator Washington, what's your question?
Thank you. Yes, thank you. I do have a question. For the handwritten number 2 on page 19, when you have these written, are they the sections? It says 14-4607. Is that applied to that section or the section above 14-4606?
Yes, it's 14-4607. Yeah, that's where the change had been made. So
Okay.
yes, it's 14-4607.
And so that'll be, so this section will not apply, will only apply to those sections. Got it.
Yeah,
And the same for
to the controllers,
for
correct.
controllers.
Mhm.
And
Pickup processors.
And the same for B as well on 21.
That's right.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
So I do think we should start. Oh, Senator Lamb, go ahead.
Ask a question. Yeah, okay. Just was maybe asking council for clarification here. There's a definition of de-identified data, which includes, I think, a commitment about maintain and use of information in de-identified form. You know, I think there have been instances where researchers have been able to re-identify even HIPAA level data because of how that data is compiled, and they can do analytics on it. If a controller under this bill is able to re-identify data, can the Attorney General take action against them under the enforcement provisions here?
Well, I think that so what would that mean? If they re-identified the data, I think it would no longer qualify as de-identified data. And therefore the law would apply to it. So all the protections of the law would apply to that data, if that's what your question is. Yeah, do you want to speak to that?
You know, I don't want to speak for Senator Lamb, but I think his question is more, is there any sort of penalty or implications to somebody who identifies data that was de-identified? Is that what the
Or it
question
was
is?
data that was de-identified, but they were able to re-identify it. So for example, California has a law that says you cannot try to re-identify that data from de-identified data.
I mean, I think that may be a different type of issue that's not directly addressed.
Right.
With the set of protections relating to personal data that are here in this bill. So that sounds to me like that might be more directly an issue in a different bill.
And for what it's worth, I would agree. I think this is more of the protection of the data, not so much that if somebody re-identifies data that was de-identified, that what are the penalties for that? This is more of if somebody has your data, what are the things that they can do with it? What are the consumer rights that you have for your data? I'm not sure if what obligations are imposed upon somebody who de-identifies data and what happens then later if it's re-identified by a different party.
Well, I guess to your original point, it doesn't prohibit somebody from actively using de-identified data to re-identify the data, right? So are there any provisions in here that would prevent someone from taking de-identified data and re-identifying it?
No, there's nothing that I think in this bill that would prohibit that from taking place.
I mean, if I may, I mean, you can't use the data though, except for what the purpose that you're telling, like, that's the whole point of the data minimization section. So if is that accurate, Patrick?
Right.
So if you say that you're using this data for this specific type purpose, and then for some reason you end up using it or manipulating it or using that data for completely different purpose, you know, if you're disclosing to the consumer that you're using it for this specific purpose, and then somehow it's used for some other purpose, then I think it would be a violation of it. But without knowing more, perhaps it's hard to say, I guess.
Right, so what potentially would happen is if you have data that's re-identified, it's now personal information, it's personal data that's subject to all of the requirements of the act. So whoever is controlling that data or processing that data, if it's identifiable, would need to comply with all of the protections and rights that are present under the bill. So I think the answer is you know, the question is what is the status of that data within the context of this data privacy framework? If it's identifiable, then it's personal data. It would be subject to all of the rights and protections here.
Council. So I think in here there's a de-identified definition that says commits in publicly available terms and conditions or a publicly available privacy policy to maintain and use the information in a de-identified form. So what's the enforcement mechanism of that?
So the amendment, what it does is it cross-references another definition that's under the commercial law article, and so it sounds to me like that's similar to the question you asked. You know, what happens if data is not de-identified data is not maintained in a way that fits within the definition of de-identified data? And I think the answer is the same. You know, then it is identifiable information that's personal information, and it's subject to this policy framework here and all the rights and protections under it.
Does anything in here prohibit like company A from selling de-identified data to company B and then company B re-identifying that data?
So I think there are provisions in here that would prohibit company B from dealing with the data in a way that deviates from the authorized use of the data that was acquired by company A. So company B deviates from the use that's been permitted. I think there's a provision in here that deals with the impacts to third parties.
So
and that they would have.
Could it be enforced on company B?
I believe so. If they don't, let's see, what's the provision? So if you go to, it's page 27 of 34, you know, in the marked reprint. This is the one provision that comes to mind that I think, you know, may get at the scenario that you're describing. It says if a third party uses or shares a consumer's information in a manner that's inconsistent with promises made to the consumer at the time of the collection of the information, the third party shall provide an affected consumer with notice of the new or changed practice before implementing the new or changed practice. So they are under an obligation to provide notice to the consumer if they use the data in a way that's different than what was initially promised. And if they don't comply with that, then they're in violation of this bill and subject to all of its enforcement remedies.
Okay, but there's nothing prohibiting company A from selling that de-identified data, right, to another company that could.
I mean, it depends. I mean, I guess, you would have the consumer would have to consent to its sale. And there's certain types of information that can't be sold, like sensitive information.
Okay.
Patrick, or if I may also, if you go to the definition of de-identified data, I mean, I guess we don't have it in here because it's the same, it's in the section of 14-4401. But it's my understanding that the definition of de-identified data prohibits the re-identification of the data.
That's
There's a
right.
public commitment by the company to maintain and use data in a de-identifiable form and not attempt to re-identify the data.
Yes.
So even by the very definition of it, it can't be re-identified. So
So just to the point that you were making earlier, Patrick, so the consumer has to consent when even when the de-identified data is being sold? Does the consumer?
No, because if it's de-identified, then it's not personal information that's subject to the protections of the act. But if it's re-identified and it's connected to the consumer, then it's personal data that would be subject to all of the rights and protections here.
Okay,
Okay.
Can I be favorable on the amendment?
not yet. Senator Mounts has a question.
Yeah, it'll be, thank you, Madam Chair, be quick. So Patrick, thank you for walking us through the amendments, but real quickly, especially on page 19, what exactly is the amendment? What are we striking? I mean, it says only applies these prohibitions to. Yeah. So what are we?
Can I just jump in real quickly here? Okay, so originally what we had was a controller may not, because a controller is the one who dictates what's going to happen with the data, right? And then you also have what's called, a processor and somebody who processes that data based on an agreement that it has, a contract that it has with the controller. And so what we had suggested by some groups was to include that obligation on both. In communication with other groups, including, AWS, Google, and others, that this situation is just, it wouldn't make sense in practice. And so it would pose an obligation on the processor when really the obligation should be on the controller, because they're the ones that dictate what should be done with the controller,
So that would mean.
with the data by the controller.
So I mean, on line 19, on page 19, lines 27 through 29 would get stricken, right?
Well, it previously said a controller and processor may not. It struck processor.
So,
And so now it all says a controller may not. Everything that begins in section 14-4607 is obligations on a controller and not the processor.
okay.
Yeah.
So essentially, with regards to a processor, everything is stricken.
Exactly. That being said, if a processor engages in certain conduct that makes it a controller that's later in the bill, then they would also have those obligations, but
Yeah,
that's
'Cause I'm
separate.
I'm kind of getting to the next page, page 21. That was more specifically because it limits provide and maintain a specific product or service. And when you get into digital advertising, that limits your ability to measure your advertising. And
Go ahead.
that was the essence of where I was going with what's stricken and what's not.
And I think there's an amendment as related to content personalization and targeted advertising.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
A motion favorable on the amendments. Do we have a second?
Yes.
Yes. Oh, there's lots more amendments, but on the Guile amendments, we have a motion and a second. Everybody in favor of the sponsors amendments? Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 in favor of the sponsors amendments.
So the next set of amendments, these are amendments that are being offered by the chair, and they actually reflect some amendments that were requested by the Maryland Insurance Administration. So the first one is on page 37 of the handwritten reprint, hand numbered reprint. This strikes the loan reference to insurance in the bill, and the MIA view on this was that this created some uncertainty regarding protections that are afforded to consumers. There are consumer protections under laws that govern insurers already under Graham Leach Bliley, and so this would strike insurance from the bill. And then the next amendment actually on page 39, this amendment down here at the bottom, which exempts data that is subject to the Graham Leach Bliley Act, was just accepted in Senator Giles' amendment. So that's already been addressed. And then the third amendment that the chair is offering is on page 41 of the handwritten reprint. And what this amendment does is it exempts personal data to the extent it is collected for, provided to, or used by a person regulated under the insurance article or an affiliate of such a person in furtherance of the business of insurance.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And with all due respect to the chair's amendments, I appreciate them. I'm grateful for them. But Patrick, to be clear, the last amendment that you just mentioned, that's a HIPAA entity exemption. Is that right? It exempts out any entities that are covered by HIPAA?
I think it's narrower.
Okay.
So the Insurance Administration had originally offered for consideration that type of HIPAA level HIPAA entity exemption, but this is more precise in limiting the exemption to this personal data to the extent it's collected for, provided to, or used by a person regulated under the insurance article or an affiliate. So it's a data level exemption.
Oh, okay. So, and I'm sorry, didn't we already have like a HIPAA data exemption in there in the bill?
So personal health protected health information protected under HIPAA is exempt.
Okay, and then, but this would be personal data that's regulated under the insurance article then, right?
It's to the extent that it's collected
Okay,
for, provided to, or used by a person regulated under the insurance article or an affiliate
okay.
in furtherance of the business of insurance.
I think it might have to do with, companies can take your data and give you a rate or sell you a policy, and then they want to give you a different rate, go to a different company, get a different rate. It might have to do with that kind of data.
Mhm.
But it's only in the furtherance of insurance. It's not used for any other purpose.
Okay. All right.
Senator Washington?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just a clarifying question. So this, I think it was already stated that insurance is everything under the insurance article here in the state of Maryland, right? Any businesses that conduct insurance. And so therefore, and this is for the furtherance of insurance. So this means that they can use any shared data that's out there to change or alter one's rate if they wanted to, or how does this apply in that scenario of utilizing data?
I mean, I think that may be one use, that this may be information that they use for underwriting. So yes. And just to be clear, there are privacy protections under a different body of law that's applicable to insurers, which are considered financial institutions under the Graham Leach Bliley Act. So there are some restrictions in place already regarding the use of data that's collected by insurance and insurers. But that scenario that you describe, I think, is accurate, maybe for underwriting.
And so right now, if we took this out, as currently without the amendment, they wouldn't be able to use some of that public data to use it for the change of the rates.
I mean, I think it needs to be used consistent with the purpose for which it's collected.
Okay, Madam Chair.
Underwriting can lower your rates or increase your rates.
Well, that's why I said change.
But this is about what they do with the data.
Right.
That they can't share it with other companies, but they can use it for the purpose of insurance.
Got it. Thank you.
So those are the chair's amendments.
What else do we have?
Do we want to vote on? We can. These are the MIA's amendments that they've requested. A motion, can we have a motion on the MIA amendments?
Move favorable.
Thank you. Do we have a second on the MIA amendments? So,
No, it's not the hill I'm gonna die on.
okay, me either. All right.
After carrying this bill, sometimes
One,
I
two,
do.
three, 4, 5,
feel that way.
6, 7. All right, so we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a second. Everybody in favor of the MIA amendments?
Oh, man, I love them.
Okay, we are short one, so whatever is minus 1, I can't even count. Thank you.
Okay, so the next amendment is handwritten 42 on the reprint. This is Senator Hayes' amendment that would and you can see the reprint that shows this on 44, that this would exempt from the bill a provider of broadcast television service, cable service, satellite service, streaming media service, or other service offering video programming described under this provision of the Federal Communications Act.
Can I speak on this one? This may be the hill I'm going to die on. With all due respect to Senator Hayes, this would exempt out Comcast and other major providers. Like, an entire entity exemption. It's completely unprecedented. Other states do not have this entire entity exemption. I know what they're getting at. They were having some concerns with the content personalization. I would hope that would be remedied by the bill or by the amendment that Senator Hershey has offered. I would just ask the committee to resist this amendment with all due respect to Senator Hayes and to our friends at Comcast and others. So thank you, Madam Chair.
We vote on Hershey's amendment?
We did, yeah, but I think if you hold yours. Right, I think I said in the last meeting that
Hershey's amendment passed. There was no need for this one. So I would like to, let's hold off on this one and take it.
So, yeah, I was just say, just generally the methodology here of walking through the amendments is we start with who's in and who's out. And then then we get to that. But but if we can, like, which entities are in, what data is in the bill, what data is out. Yeah, okay. So the next is Senator Moutz's amendment. This is handwritten page 45 of the set of reprints here. And then if you go to page 47 of the reprint, this amendment, we're starting to get into definitions. This amendment alters the definition of biometric data as it's used in the bill so that it reads that biometric data includes any other unique biological characteristic that is used to uniquely authenticate a consumer's identity as opposed to can be used. So what I think the amendment aims to do is narrow the universe of information that would qualify as biometric data under the bill.
This amendment would conform that definition to BIPA and other definitions that have been implemented in other states that have implemented this law.
Which states, Senator Mounts, maybe you could tell us give us a little more information. Thank you.
I give you 2, Illinois and Washington. And I didn't say Illinois, I said Illinois.
2 good progressive states.
And it was an amendment that was requested by Bio. Yeah, it was requested by the association.
Which is those?
Bio.
And just for procedure purposes, I mean, and actually, you know what, just
So there's one,
On that hill either?
okay.
And for what it's worth, I know we haven't gotten to the second part of his amendment. I'm fine with his other amendment that he asked for, so I know you'll go through that one,
Okay.
so it's.
Okay, so yeah, so the other amendment is on handwritten page 49. And what this amendment would do would exempt de-identified data from the bill. Specifically, information that is de-identified in accordance with the requirements for de-identification set forth under 45 CFR 164.514, which is the HIPAA privacy rule. And this is de-identified requirements for de-identification set forth in the statute that is derived from individually identifiable health information as described in HIPAA, or personal information consistent with the human subject protection requirements of the US Food and Drug Administration.
Can I ask, I'm trying to understand what de-identified means. Is this data that's collected but doesn't have any identity to it that they use for research or for, okay, I got it. Thank you.
There's a Senator Lamb.
This is to my earlier point that there are ways to be able to take that data and re-identify. There's potentially ways to re-identify that data, even though it's de-identified in that form.
Well, I hope there isn't any organization attempting to do that because it must be pretty complicated, but I think it's important. You know, we ask for a lot of data about, you know, results of things and how many people have healthcare, for instance, and how many people, you know, don't. And I mean, I think we have to have ways to collect that data and not necessarily be able to identify it to a person. So I just want to understand it better. Is that all Senator Mouse's amendments?
Yes, those are the two amendments that Senator Mounts is offering.
Can I have a motion for Senator Mouse's amendments?
That move favorable.
Well, so so we had two pieces. We had the change to biometric data, and then we had this piece, which was exempting de-identified
Yes.
data.
So those are Senator. So we have a motion, a second. Is there another comment?
I did.
Senator Mounts, right? Senator Mounts, were you? Senator Classmeyer was the first, Senator Mounts was the second. So we are voting on Senator Mounts amendments. All in favor of these amendments? Okay. Not you.
I'm abstaining.
Jesus. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 to 1, Madam Chair.
Okay, so there's one, I think I'm gonna jump to this one because this gets to the question of who's in the bill and who's out of the bill. This is Senator Klausmeyer's amendment. It didn't get included into the packet, but it's one that was offered at the last voting session. And so this one would exempt a nonprofit controller that processes or shares personal data solely for the purposes of assisting law enforcement agencies in investigating criminal or fraudulent acts relating to insurance or first responders in responding to catastrophic events.
Can I just speak on it just really quickly? So I like, with all due respect to the vice chair, this is one amendment that I'm going to vote against. And the reason why is because I believe that they are already protected by a separate section of the bill that basically says that nothing prevents anybody from using the personal data in order to investigate fraud, crime, et cetera. And I've also spoken with our friends in the insurance industry, and they would agree with me, but I'm not going to necessarily speak on their behalf. But I think that there are already protections in place in the bill. And so consequently, I'm going to vote against this amendment. So thank you.
Remember the other day we were saying it was redundant?
Yes.
But I don't know that it is. And the current bill, the people that have asked me to put it in there, or it's just data so current criminals wouldn't be able to get tipped off. And that's part of the reason that we're doing it. And the AG office is being purist and not how the real law enforcement works. So I'm for this amendment all the way. And I'm sorry that you're stuck on that hill.
Senator Reedy?
We talked, you and I talked about it, and at one point I said it was redundant, and then I'm finding out it is not redundant. So.
Senator Reedy?
I think it may be a little bit in the eye of the beholder, but I support the amendment only because I think you just want to be extra cautious with this particular sector. And it sounds like this is language that's in some other bills, not to go back to the other states thing, but it's in some other states, as what I'm told. So might be on the safe side just to put it in. We can always, well, there's a number of states that haven't done anything. So we're breaking a lot of new ground. So I think we should probably be a little careful as it relates to stuff that they need to track down criminals.
Even if it is in another part of the law, I mean, it's not gonna hurt anything. Okay.
Senator Hayes?
This amendment practically applied.
Yeah, so this particular type of entity, this nonprofit organization that performs this type of fraud,
Who would
fraud
that be?
prevention
Who
service.
would be a nonprofit organization that provides crime control prevention?
National criminal.
Yeah, there's one that's called the National Insurance Crime Bureau.
National Insurance Crime Bureau.
Yeah.
Okay.
NICB.
And so they,
NICB.
You know, the NICB.
yeah, right. So they would be exempt from this bill.
Yes, they would.
Because
But to be clear,
Yes, they would.
to be clear, they already they don't sell this data, so they're not really, or share it, correct, except with law enforcement agencies.
There are people who commit fraudulent crimes against insurance all over the country.
right.
And I think that they share that information about who these people are. I think that's what this is about. So, there's big things that happen in Florida where a bunch of people create accidents that aren't really accidents. And
Right.
so if they don't share the information about the offenders, they don't know that it's being continually repeated.
Gotcha.
Florida's not like Illinois or Washington.
They're only sharing it with Google and Meta.
That's right.
Meta was broken today. You can move
Favorable.
second. Is there a second on the amendment? Second, we have a motion and a second. All in favor of amendment? Senator Klausmeyer's amendment. All right, what do we have? 1, 2, 3, 5 to 4, 6 to 4, 6 to 3.
Did it pass?
Yes.
Okay, and so we're back to the reprint, the thick reprint and handwritten 50. This is Senator Hershey's amendment that he brought up at the last voting session. And if you go to page 52, the handwritten reprint, this strikes the prohibition on collecting personal data for the sole purpose of content personalization or marketing without the consent of the consumer whose personal data is collected. Or in other words, this is the provision that says that you have to opt in to this kind of collection.
Is this the loyalty issue? Is this for loyalty?
This one basically protects the customer experience. So as we've all been on the web many times before, and you see information that feels targeted at you, this would allow that to continue unless you expressly say, I don't want to see information targeted to me.
Okay.
And so we think that this keeps that part the same and, again, protects content personalization and that experience.
Bill sponsor, where are you on this, please? Uh-oh.
As much as it pains me a bit, since it's from Senator Hershey. This is also not my hill, so I'll vote for this one.
Move favorable.
Yep.
Okay, let's take a vote on Senator Hershey's amendment.
It pains me to do this.
Wow, even the sponsor voted for it. Okay, it's unanimous.
So that just leaves Senator Hayes' amendment, which I think it's not.
So we don't need Senator Hayes' amendment.
Okay,
This he did. He went like this.
so that's it.
All right.
Bye-bye.
We have to thank.
But we have to vote the bill.
We have to vote the bill.
Patrick, you did an amazing.
Well done, Pat.
Can I have a motion?
On Senate Bill 571 as amended with multiple amendments. Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second? And we have a second. All in favor of Senate Bill 571 as amended? Unanimous. Thank you.
What is the status?
I have no idea. What's the status?
Sponsor, what is the status of the House bill?
My understanding is they had it in subcommittee it was in EC, and then they were holding it was supposed to be last Friday, and then they were holding it. I'm not sure right now, but they're pretty parallel.
Okay.
And they're going to be differences. For example, they don't have the right to cure, and so we'll just have to deal with it later in Congress.
Okay.
Okay, well, mine's the next bill up.
Okay. Well, again, I just want to thank Senator Guile and Patrick for all their work on this because it has been a tremendous amount of work.
Okay, so the next bill is it's similar in ways. It's the Senate Bill 571, the Online Products and Services Data of Children Maryland Kids Code. This is the bill that requires a covered entity, which is a business that collects personal data and meets certain size requirements in the state under the bill, that provides an online product reasonably likely to be accessed by children to complete a data protection impact assessment of the online product. This is a systematic survey to assess compliance with the duty to act in the best interests of children. And the bill establishes numerous rules, procedures, and prohibitions relating to the assessments. It specifies entities and information to which its requirements do not apply. For example, the bill does not apply to health information or other covered entities already governed by certain federal regulations and laws. And this data protection impact assessment must meet certain requirements, such as identifying the purpose of the online product and how it uses children's data, making a determination as to whether the product is designed and offered in a manner that's consistent with the best interests of children, reasonably likely to access the product, through consideration of certain factors, like whether algorithms used by the product would result in reasonably foreseeable and material physical or financial harm to the child. After receiving a written request from the Attorney General, a covered entity that provides an online product reasonably likely to be accessed by children must provide the Attorney General with a list of all data protection impacts assessments completed pursuant to the bill's requirements. There are also a number of prohibitions under the bill for a company that provides these products. For example, an entity may not process the personal data of a child in a way that is inconsistent with the best interests of children, profile a child by default with limited exceptions, or process personal data of a child that is not reasonably necessary to provide an online product with which the child is actively and knowingly engaged. If a covered entity is in substantial compliance with the bill's requirements, the Attorney General must provide written notice before filing an action authorized by the bill. This is that opportunity to cure a violation. And nothing in the bill may be interpreted to provide a private right of action under the bill or any other law, impose liability in a manner that is inconsistent with federal law, prevent or preclude a child from deliberately or independently searching for or specifically requesting content, or require a covered entity to implement an age gating requirement. And a violation of the bill is an unfair, abusive, or deceptive trade practice under the Consumer Protection Act and subject to the Act's enforcement provisions. The bill establishes civil penalties for a violation. It's $2,500 per affected child for each negligent violation and $7,500 per affected child for each intentional violation. There are some amendments that Senator Kramer is offering. I've got a reprint here and I can walk through them.
Clarifying and
Yeah, generally that's right. I mean, I think there are a lot of clarifications in the bill. If you walk through, there are certain places where There are changes in definitions. Some of the definitions have been changed to align with the bill that the committee just voted to approve. I think just going through, see if there's anything.
Ask. Could I ask, it's on, shoot, now I've lost it. Page 12 of the reprint. Data subject to a statute or regulation identified under item 1 that is controlled by a covered entity or service provider that is required to comply with Title 5 of the Federal Graham-Leach-Bailey Act. What is the Graham-Leach-Bailey Act?
Yeah,
I remember Senator Graham, but I don't know what that bill is.
Yeah, again, this is actually very similar to some of the issue that came up on the bill that the committee just approved, and that's the bill that governs financial institutions.
Oh, right. Oh,
Right.
gotcha. Okay.
And so what this amendment does is it says it doesn't apply to data controlled by entities that are subject to these laws.
And the
So-
federal, you get the federal health information thing. Yeah. Okay. All right. That's fine. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, so on page 14 of 23 of the reprint, you can see a couple places regarding how the bill may be construed. It can't be construed to require a covered entity to monitor or censor third-party content or otherwise impact the existing rights and freedoms of any person. Be construed to discriminate against children on the basis of race, color, religion, national origin, disability, gender identity, sex, or sexual orientation. I think maybe the last thing. Yeah, on page 18 of 2023, the impact assessment must include a description of the steps that will be taken for an entity to comply. And maybe going to page 20 of 23 of the reprint. This strikes language relating to parental monitoring and tracking, and that was in the bill. And then I think maybe just the last thing I'll flag is on the very last page of the reprint. It addresses how the bill should be construed if there's a conflict with other data privacy laws. What this says is that wherever possible, law relating to consumers' personal data should be construed to harmonize with the provisions of this bill. And in the event of a conflict between other laws and this bill, the provisions of the law that afford the greatest protection for the right of privacy for consumers shall control.
Madam Chair, for the children, I move the bill as amended faithfully.
And I have a second or a question. Wait, can I get a second? And Senator Washington seconded.
And I appreciate, I just have a question. When we do this, this all goes on the computer system, is that correct?
Is it internet? Is this
Internet?
This is primarily relating to, yes.
Okay, but if kids are watching the TV and they're streaming, is this all included in that, these safeguards?
I believe the answer to that is that if it's targeted towards children or reasonably known, yes, depending on what the source is. If they're on their computers, yes.
Okay, because I
And
think
video
that's
games, yes.
maybe that's for another bill that these TV shows do that, but I guess they did them when I was little too, so.
Senator Lamb, I see your microphone's on again.
Oh, someone noticed this. That's, I did have a question because our office got a letter from, and I think all the other offices probably did as well, from LGBT Tech. And their letter noted that there was a similar bill in California that there were constitutional concerns on, expressing concern that this risks censoring minors to LGBT related content. Do we know, and maybe this is a question for council, do we know if what was referenced in that letter with these constitutional concerns were constitutional concerns in the California bill are addressed in this bill?
So the California bill is the subject of litigation. I think a federal district court issued an injunction flagging some issues with that bill. I think the view is that it's governmental pressure on a company to censor content in violation of the First Amendment. There are a couple differences with that bill. There's no age gating requirement, for example. There's no mechanism that a company has to use to ascertain the age of an individual. That I think was one issue that may be of concern regarding the First Amendment. The second is that bill had a requirement that a company mitigate harms that they identify in the product. So this bill does not have that. So I think generally speaking, the concern is that it would be the government putting its pressure on a private entity, a business entity, to censor the content that's being offered on their platform. And so that may be a concern for a variety of topics. And, I think maybe folks within that community were concerned that could be an impact. But that's the context of the litigation that, as I understand it, in California.
And I would add that the amendment in here does prohibit discrimination based on protected classes, based on any concerns regarding the issues that you just brought up, to ensure that's not going to be the circumstance.
So just one follow-up clarifying question. Is the bill about the storing and use of data collected about minors and doesn't actually limit the minors' access to the LGBT content?
No, it's not.
It does not limit their access to it. And that was specifically part of what we were protecting here.
Okay,
Yepper.
thank you.
Okay. So,
Can we have a motion on Senate Bill 571? We motioned in second? We did that. Okay, we had questions. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor of Senate Bill 571 as amended? All right, can we call the roll, please? I'm sorry.
That's all right. Senate Bill 571 with amendment. Vice Chair Klausmeier.
Yes. for the
Yes.
Children.
Senator Kramer.
Yes. for the
Yes.
Children.
Senator Hayes.
Yes.
Yes. Senator Reedy.
No. Oh,
No.
Lord.
Senator Mount.
Oh, children.
Senator Mouts.
No.
No. Senator Washington. Yes. Senator Guile.
Yes.
Yes. Senator Lamb.
Who wants their children?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Senator Hershey.
No for the children.
Madam Chair.
That is a 7-3 vote and the bill passes. Last bill of the day. Senate Bill 791, Patrick.
Did you want to? Okay. Which is good. Okay.
They don't let you.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's the last bill of the day.
Yeah, it is.
It's been amazing. We've passed 16 bills so far.
So this is the third 30+ page bill for this evening. It's Senate Bill 791. This is the one that alters and establishes requirements and prohibitions relating to health insurance utilization review and prior authorization, the process used by carriers to determine whether requested healthcare service is medically necessary. It alters requirements related to internal grievance and adverse decision procedures and establishes requirements on payers and healthcare providers relating to the provision of patient benefit information. There are a number of protections in the bill. One is, in addition to other requirements, a carrier must allow a patient to remain on a prescription drug when it was previously approved by the carrier and the prescriber tests that the drug continues to be necessary to effectively treat the patient. There are other provisions to increase transparency and communication during the review process, and then there are some required studies.
So there are some questions about the fiscal note, and the sponsor would like to make some comments.
Yes, I would just like to say there's some folks that still want a few amendments, and I just hope we can come to the conclusion that this is a great bill and just really am gonna hold it for this evening because we have some more discussions going on. Thank
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. That ends the hearing for tonight.